about what weapons to supply and in what order. So he has, I think, really misread the West and its capacity to come together. But the big gamble now, the big bet, David, is which side is going to crack first? Will Russia be able to outlast the West? Because all of those assumptions are still potentially there. NATO might weaken, EU might weaken, the global consensus might weaken, and they can work on that themselves. Or will the capacity of the Russians to suffer the kind of under the sanctions and now conscription and now the deaths, thousands of deaths, we don't know how many deaths, but substantial numbers of Russians are being killed. So which side is going to crack first in this war of unity versus disunity?
Very interesting. All right, we have to stop here for our break, and when we come back, we're going to dig into wartime politics, the political fallout from the war in Ukraine, and the way that politics shape the conflict. That's when we come back. I'm David Smith. You're listening to The World on City News.
Traffic and weather for Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News 1011 everywhere.
Good morning. It's Sunday, February the 19th. Here's what's making news right now. Demonstrators marched through the streets of Ottawa Saturday afternoon, forcing police to close access to Spark Street and Elgin Street. Around 3:20, police stated that they were blocking those two streets to prevent major disruptions to winter-loot activities. An increased presence of bylaw police is expected in the downtown core all weekend. It marks the one-year anniversary of the police starting to remove convoy protesters from their encampments in front of Parliament Hill. Officials implemented special parking restrictions and limited pedestrian access to Parliament Hill to just 2 gates for the duration of the weekend. Ottawa Fire used the jaws of life to rescue one person from a car following a 2-vehicle collision near LeBreton Flats on Saturday. Firefighters responded to a call from Ottawa Police just after 2 on Empress Avenue in Albert. One vehicle sustaining heavy damage to its side. Ottawa Fire quickly extricated the individual and handed them over to the care of Ottawa paramedics. You're listening to City News.
I'm City News weather specialist John Wilson. Mostly cloudy today, but milder than yesterday by quite a sight. Yesterday we didn't quite make the freezing mark. Today it's up to 4. Tonight, mostly cloudy. We should stay above freezing at 2 degrees, maybe slip one more. Tomorrow, cloudy with showers or flurries. Could be 2 centimeters late. We'll get to 3 degrees first, then drop. Then it clears overnight to flurries again on Tuesday and 1. And then snow late Wednesday into Thursday could amount to something rather major. Keep an eye on that.
Internationally renowned scholar.
In other words, he knows his stuff.
You're listening to The World of Elliot Tepper on City News.
The political fallout from the war in Ukraine, it really touches all corners of the globe. The impacts of the conflict in Eastern Europe can be felt right now throughout the Middle East, here at home in Canada and North America, and as far away as Taiwan in the South China Sea. Professor Tepper, I'd like to take this segment and talk about wartime politics for a few minutes. One of your areas of expertise, of course, is in comparative politics, analyzing the differences between different political systems, between states. I'd like to ask you first about Ukrainian leadership. How much do you think we can attribute Ukraine's success to the leadership of President Volodymyr Zelensky, who has been such a central character throughout this whole conflict?
Yes. The people of Ukraine had a choice a while ago, in 2014, that period. Would Ukraine turn toward Russia? They had a leader at that time who said, yes, we really belong with Russia. Or the population, on the other hand, took to the streets in the Orange Revolution that you referred to, saying, no, we want to turn toward Europe. So there was already a lot of leadership at all kinds of levels in terms of determining the future of the country. But the wartime leadership of President Zelensky, remember, he was a comedian who came to power saying 2 things. One is, I'm going to cure us of the corruption that is so holding us back, but also I will be the one to align us with the West, not with Russia. His leadership has been inspiring. If you've been following the speeches that he's been giving, he gave to the EU, I thought was particularly effective, but the one he just gave in the UK rise to the occasion, and it's an inspiration.
Indeed. Thank you for that. Now, turning our attention to Russia and Russian domestic politics, something we don't get a lot of insight to in the ordinary news cycle here in Canada. I have read, Professor, one of the reasons Vladimir Putin embarked on his crusade, you could say, in Ukraine, why they annexed Crimea in 2014 in the first place, was because he needed a Russian nationalistic cause to strengthen his authority as president. So I wonder if you can provide our listeners with some context, broadly speaking, about how the political landscape within Russia has contributed to Putin's move to invade Ukraine. What is the political calculus there?
Yes, the initial one, of course, is if you're weak at home, attack somebody abroad, as we discussed earlier. There's been a waxing and waning of support for him, but keep in mind that he is absolutely in charge of Russia. There's hardly any checks and balances anymore. His authoritarian rule has become more visible as authoritarianism, but he's relying now increasingly on the very traditional elements of the Russian state, which is kind of a blood and soil, the church and the sacredness of the soil. The traditional nationalists now, long moved from the kind of modernizing leader that will lead Russia into the future gloriously. His only glory now is in weapons, and he's got weapons which are invincible. We don't get a fair reading of what's going on inside Russia, because who's going to answer a questionnaire when somebody knocks on your door, particularly if they've got a soldier with them? Do you love your president or not? There is one firm that is quite highly regarded, and this war did initially lead to a surge of support for Mr. Putin. That may be weakening now. The best way we can measure that is the opposition took to the streets, and it took draconian measures. If you protest now this special military operation in any way, you can be put in jail for a very long time. And there were people beaten in the streets, but also beyond that, people fleeing. Once conscription in particular was put on, I saw one estimate that there might be up to 1 million people. More people are leaving Russia than are being conscripted to fight this patriotic war.
Wow, that says it all, I think. Turning our attention to the West now, NATO. How has the war in Ukraine shaped the political dynamics of NATO? Can you give us some insight there? Is NATO a political beast by nature? What is the situation there?
Well, NATO is a political alliance, but it's a military alliance first and foremost, as we know. Actually, there's a whole subtext to this that Lester Pearson put into the original writing of NATO, that it would be more than just a military alliance. It's more about peace than about war, and that it would have social and political and economic ramifications, not just military. And that's been carried out. So basically, Mr. Putin has created, as I've said on air many times, a new Europe, because Europe has a sense of unity they haven't had in a long time. And Mr. Zelensky, President Zelensky's welcome. We want you, you're a member of the family, but also NATO has become much more dynamic and more unified than recent memory. They, as you know, two states outside of NATO, in the region, have said for decades the core of our identity is we are neutral politically and militarily. We are not going to join alliances. And as soon as Mr. Putin said the old order is back, Finland and Sweden said we want him to NATO, we want him now. And the move now is to find a way around Turkey's obstructionism in order to get them in. So there is more NATO rather than less NATO, as others have been pointing out.
That is a wonderful way to characterize the situation. It is, to me, the ultimate irony of this conflict, how it started in part because Vladimir Putin underestimated the unity of NATO, and the conflict has served only to make NATO more united. Now, Ukraine as a state for years has been attempting to join the European Union. A lot of people may not know that. Why is that? Why is Ukraine trying to become a part of the European Union? Why is that important to them? And does the war hurt or help that cause?
The whole struggle has been to inside Ukraine is where will their identity lie? Is it going to lie with the former Soviet Union? Are they Russians actually, just like Mr. Putin says? Or, as the population has been saying, and as they proved twice now in overthrowing governments, taking to the streets saying, no, we are actually Europeans. Joining the EU has enormous symbolic meaning to them. This says we are European, and it also has very practical implications because you're part of the world's largest trading bloc as a preferred member. As it turns out, it's not easy to join the EU. There's a whole range of things, and it might be years before it actually happens. But the EU has gone out of its way to make Ukraine feel welcome. The head of the EU said, you are a member of the family. You're part of the family here. So showing that Ukraine is part of Europe and not part of the Russian sphere of influence is absolutely critical to Ukraine.
And I imagine, you're the expert here, correct me if I'm wrong, I imagine if the European Union does accept Ukraine, that would be a blow to Vladimir Putin's narrative that people in Ukraine want to be part of Russia, right?
Oh, absolutely. There is a problem. As I say, it's very difficult to join the EU. One of the problems that Ukraine has had, which President Zelensky came to power to help fix, as we noted, was the whole issue of corruption. And right in the middle of the war, he's been firing people, including the senior defense people and heads of these provinces, the oblasts, their front lines units in the war. He's been firing them, removing them, in order to show Europe and also to fulfill his own sense of what Ukraine is about. That we're dealing effectively with the corruption issue, and that will ease our way into being fully accepted quicker inside the EU.
I see. Now, there will be another presidential election.